If you're a fan of the Left 4 Dead series and want to enjoy a bit of couch co-op, it might come as a surprise to learn that the built-in split-screen menu options are nowhere to be seen on the PC version. While Left 4 Dead 2 has several workshop mods capable of restoring console-like split-screen functionality, its predecessor, Left 4 Dead 1, did not receive the same treatment. Fortunately, split-screen remains possible to this day. Unfortunately, though, any online tutorials are either scarce, perpetuate common issues and misinformation, or are very reminiscent of their time. Because not everyone shares the exact same brand and type of controllers, configuring split screen can range from fairly straightforward to mildly complex and tedious. On the off chance you happen to have two Xbox 360 controllers laying around, buying the controller buttons in-game is all that's required. Some third-party controllers will also opt to use an official Xbox 360 controller for Windows driver, so it's worth opening Steam's controller settings, toggling Steam input overrides, and checking the names of any detected controllers for either Xbox 360 controller or Xbox One controller, as the latter is backwards compatible. Another method to verify controller compatibility is to simply test it in-game. To do this, open Left 4 Dead's properties within Steam and add the name of any split-screen map to the launch options. Upon launching Left 4 Dead, even with nothing bound, any gamepad joystick should still control the player's yaw, allowing us to confirm which controller is responsible for which player in-game. Hopefully, each controller corresponds to a different player, or if you plan on using the keyboard and mouse instead of a controller, only the guest or split-screen player receives controller inputs. However, there are still two other possibilities. One, where both controllers are in charge of the same player, and two, where the keyboard and mouse controls the same player as any connected controllers. In either case, whether you purchased off-brand controllers, hey, I'm not judging, or only have one incompatible controller, additional setup is required. A split-screen workaround commonly used in Left 4 Dead 2 utilizes in-game cheats to redirect keyboard and mouse inputs to the guest player, which might be useful for a niche yet hassle-free split-screen experience. In other words, if achievement progress doesn't matter and exclusively playing split-screen offline is sufficient, open Left 4 Dead's launch parameters and add -dev, -console, and +in_force_user1. Launch the game and execute a controller bind preset from the developer console. To create a session, enter ss_map followed by a map name. Optionally, append a game mode, either co-op, survival, or versus, after said map name. Provided keys and buttons were successfully bound, the keyboard and mouse should control the alternate guest player, while other connected devices remain in control of your main Steam account player. Permanently altering a controller's player slot is a different story. Depending on when you're watching this, the controller layout section may also be hidden in desktop mode for some reason, so go ahead and switch to big picture mode if needed. Open the controller settings and edit the layout of your desired controller. Using any bound button as a placeholder, put a player count as its action. Pressing said button in-game should, in theory, switch players. In practice, future updates should gradually improve the odds of this functioning as intended. Basic button swaps and community presets can also be configured at your own discretion. However, directly calling an in-game action, opposed to the key assigned to said in-game action, isn't currently possible via Steam's controller settings, making advanced layouts obsolete in the context of this tutorial. Without preferred controller designations, Universal Split Screen is a bit more complicated, yet still possible via third-party programs. Inside your Steam library, start by opening Left 4 Dead's properties, and inside the Controller tab, disable Steam Input Game-Specific Overrides. X360CE not only standardizes device inputs like Steam's implementation, but also currently offers greater legacy compatibility and important remapping features. It can be downloaded from either the official .com website or the GitHub repository. As Left 4 Dead is a 32-bit game, that is the version I will be downloading and showcasing in this video. Extract the contents of the downloaded zip archive to obtain the executable file stored inside. I'm also going to scan and upload the extracted executable file to virustotal.com, as you should for any potentially harmful file downloaded from the internet. Run X360CE and create a configuration. Chances are someone else owns the same device or controller and has already uploaded their mapping settings, in which case searching online at each pop-up window will save us a few minutes. Pressing any button should now cause the visual Xbox 360 controller to glow accordingly. Even if you plan on editing the default game binds to something else, it's best practice to match the device's buttons with the buttons on screen. If the device wasn't detected or the buttons mismatch, click the drop-down arrow, select the record option, and then press the corresponding button to correctly assign it. After double-checking everything, switch to the Controller tab. Change the Map To option from 0 to 2. If you plan on using additional controllers, configure them the same way as before, but change the Map To option to 1. Save and exit the program. 2 new files should appear. Browse Left 4 Dead's local files from Steam or manually navigate to the game directory. Copy the generated files into this folder. Now that your devices are properly mapped to act as compatible Xbox 360 controllers for their respective players, the game needs to know which buttons correspond to which actions. Navigate to Left 4 Dead's game directory. Open the Left 4 Dead folder without spaces, and then the add-ons folder. While the game is closed, drag the downloaded split-screen VPK file to this location. To verify that the add-on is correctly installed, launch the game and ensure it's listed as an add-on from the Extras menu. To open the developer console, press the tilde key on your keyboard by default. If your keyboard lacks a tilde key or pressing it doesn't open the console can be enabled from the options menu or forced to open upon launching the game. Before proceeding, it's recommended to enter host_rightconfig_config_old into the developer console once, to create a backup of your current control scheme in case it becomes irreparably modified. Type exec L4D_SS_quick setup, and then autocomplete the result to select the video tutorial script. Theoretically, we're done configuring everything. All that's left to do is check in-game whether or not our sensitivities are inverted. Pitch changes the vertical sensitivity, while yaw changes the horizontal sensitivity. There are also executable split-screen files for each respective combination of inverted sensitivities for each player. At this point, we can call a vote to change a chapter and, depending on your patience, you might have noticed a slight problem with the default PC controller binds. The guest player is unable to vote. Waiting for the vote to subside might be acceptable with friends, but just like Justin Roiland messaging a minor knowing full well they aren't 18 yet, I don't want to wait that long. One solution to this problem is to change the default F1 and F2 keys to vote for both players. Another solution involves executing a slightly modified custom configuration file that makes certain buttons vote in addition to performing their default actions. A fancier solution involves switching certain button binds while another button is held, avoiding any accidental votes during typical gameplay. Either way, voting, despite being highly recommended, isn't required to play online. Any server with an available player slot can support a split-screen player via the ss_connect console command. Upon joining as a spectator, Join Team 2 selects the survivor team with an optional survivor name parameter following it. Join Team 3 selects the infected team in versus mode. Lastly, while ss_disconnect is broken on dedicated servers, it functions as intended on local servers and removes the guest player from the session. But wait, there's more! Contrary to what this video tutorial might suggest, memorizing and manually inputting console commands isn't my forte. Instead of joining servers via the developer console like a madman, switching between controller configurations might make more sense for avid split-screen users. Hear me out. Take one of these shown configuration files depending on your preferred settings and bind any keyboard button to execute it. When I press said keyboard button, the guest controller essentially switches into a helper mode where buttons on the controller are mapped to joining the server and adjusting various split-screen related settings shown on screen. Once I've finished adjusting everything, pressing start makes the controller function as normal. With this method, an experienced user can omit adjusting settings and strictly connect a guest split-screen player to the session, all while never opening the console or memorizing more than a few button presses. Understandably, not everyone is as keen on predetermined controller binds, so we'll cover a couple more settings individually. Setinfo name X and name to Y will temporarily change the Steam player's name to X for the current chapter, and permanently change the guest player's name to Y, respectively. While not directly related to split screen, toggling SV_pausable and CL_crosshair_dynamic may come in handy. Regarding video settings, by default, ss_split mode 0 automatically divides the screen based on resolution, whereas ss_split mode 1 or ss_split mode 2 can be explicitly defined for horizontal or vertical split screen respectively. Further resolution customization, including custom FOV values, can be specified by editing the split_screen_config text file found in the Left 4 Dead subfolder inside the game directory. Despite the provided presets covering a modest range of playstyles, there is inevitably going to be people that fine-tune every keybind to the extent it no longer resembles the default controls. So, let's briefly discuss the process of swapping a few buttons. Bring up the developer console and enter key_list bound keys. From here, it's possible to infer the internal names of buttons and actions for custom binds. As an example, if I wanted the X button to reload like the default B button, submitting bind followed by the button name and then the action name assigns the respective action to said key. Add cmd2 to the start of the bind command for it to apply to the second player. Advanced users may prefer to search for actions differently. Key_find binding plus attack, for instance, returns any buttons responsible for shooting, as well as any buttons responsible for shoving. Finally, toggle_duck and +duck are self-explanatory action names for each method of crouching. Once everything is customized to your liking, it's probably a good idea to save your progress by inputting host_writeconfig with a new unique name. Connecting a split-screen player using the controller as shown earlier is still possible by executing a specific configuration file designed for pre-existing custom binds. Beyond this point, addressing in-depth setups including bind limitations as well as alias wrapping would constitute a separate tutorial in and of itself. With that being said, anyone interested can install the Left 4 Dead authoring tools and inspect the add-on for themselves. With a little bit of extra setup time, Left 4 Dead 1 split screen is not only possible in the current year, but arguably more intuitive to use than most people would expect, considering Valve neglected native split screen support on PC. If anything went wrong, assuming you followed this tutorial to a T, you can always enter exec config_old into the console to restore your settings prior to any changes caused by the presets. With all this being said, thank you very much for watching, and have a great night. I just had to throw in my little outro, sorry.